all our members of the PC and our structures in the province, our host district, Linda Jabani district, led by Comrade Africa Masoha. We appreciate this constant memory of Comrade Joe Slovo through the march. And we have agreed that our members must now join this march and regularize this march every morning. The comrades are talking about actually joining the Soweto Marathon, and it will be appreciated that we participate in the marathon. I'll join that program as well. Our ANC delegate, Comrade Tata Morero, our regional chairperson here, my dear comrade from the Youth Congress. Yeah, we share many great memories, Comrade Dada. But thank you very much. I think I went to visit the daughter of my aunt in Diepkloof during the Nazareth conference of the ANC, the initial part, one of the days when the commissions were not in session because of elections and stuff. And it was bad to see how Soweto is becoming the dirt on the street, not being picked up. This is just unacceptable. And it's not happening the first time. In 2016, I think, after we left office, Christmas in Soweto, dustbins were not collected. Terrible things. Our people must not forget this kind of things. And I think that the political leadership in council must sort this matter. And I agree with you. If we can't sort it on the democratic platforms, we must come back and remobilize the masses. But we cannot accept our people to be treated this way. You can go to the taxi rank in Tshwane. We went there, we were working there, fellow fighter, after we went to protest the release of Janus Walus. The place is stinking. It's not been taken care of. The municipalities, despite what they proclaim, including this one here led by this opposition here in Tshwane as well as here in Johannesburg, they continue to disregard the well-being of our people. But thank you for making time, Comrade Dada. And the leadership of all ANC comrades who are here, the leadership of COSATU, First Deputy President. Oh yes.
Also if comrades with the system, can you also help? Because sorry to interrupt. We understand that comrades at the back, they can't hear the GS. We're going to ask him to raise his voice, but there's a limit to that. If you could also assist us somehow. Thank you. Sorry, no problem.
Thank you, Stan. Yeah, I guess it's better now. Is it okay, comrades at the back? Thank you. First Deputy President of COSATU, Comrade Mike Shingange, fellow fighter, the fighting shop steward. Thank you very much for your kind words, including the sharp issues we have raised about the living condition of workers and the betrayal that is seeping in. That issue must continue to be raised until workers' rights are fully protected and observed and respected by government and all institutions, all employers across the country. Your delegation from COSATU, I've seen members of the Central Executive Committee and the provincial leadership, Comrade Munyela, and several members from affiliates. National Secretary of our Young Communist League, brand newly elected, Comrade Mzwandile Takudi. Mzwandile, not Mawetu. Who said Mawetu earlier on? That's Comrade Mzwandile, newly elected. He's also with Comrade, National Chairperson of the Young Communist League, newly elected as well, Comrade Nobile Kumede, young woman. Much appreciated. It's a good movement by the Young Communist League to elect a woman as the leader, one of the top two in our structures of our Young Communist League. Our international comrade, Comrade Ian Bedowes, from the Communist Party of Zimbabwe, ZAPO veteran, You are most welcome, and let me also appreciate your message and extend on our behalf condolences to Comrade Benedict Mlalazi and his family, and to the movement in Zimbabwe. We've got here as well outside protocol, which I need to acknowledge General Sam Mamose. Where's General Mamose? Can he come here? Then let me recognize Comrade Kinsbia, one of our strong litigants on the platform of the masses of our country who are facing evictions by the banks in our country. I've called General Mamose to come here. Just so that you know, this is one of the special operations, special ops units of Umkhonto Wesizwe that was commanded by Commander Joe Slovo. General.
Amandla.
These are comrades who fought gallantly, was in the same unit with our leaders who are lying here, Banimulukwani, and all of them. Great respect, General. He's retired now, but he's still young.
Yes.
Thank you, General. We must comrade from our province and the office and make sure that in this event, Joe Slovo, we always have a speaker from the MK Military War Veterans, or at least someone from Umkhonto Wesizwe, because we should not forget that part of history that Comrade Joe Slovo led. So it must always be part of us. I must also indicate, Comrade, that this morning, some of our comrades, Comrade Tunyiswa and others, members of our Central Committee, started the funeral of Comrade Thelmamani Nomalingi, who used to call us his T, who worked for a long time at the party headquarters as our receptionist. Equally, a couple of weeks ago, we buried our current receptionist who succeeded Comrade Mani, Comrade Mili, as well as our district organizer, Comrade Georgina, in the Ekru Lane. May we please observe a moment of silence for these comrades, our staff members. Amandla, may their undying spirit live long. Comrade Chair, today marks the 28th year since we lost this gallant revolutionary we are celebrating today, Comrade Joe Slovo, an activist and leader of our entire liberation movement, who died on the 6th of January 1995 and had elected to be buried here amongst his comrades. This is a hero's acre where he's buried, where several members of the Special Ops and other MK units are buried, and other gallant fighters of our liberation struggles who were not necessarily in the military struggle are also buried. We commemorate Joe Slovo amidst a devastating load shedding program in our country. This load shedding that we have called on government to immediately stop or find mechanisms to stop it was adopted, basically started when government adopted the white paper on energy in 1998, and therefore marked the post-1994 beginnings of load shedding that we face today. Load shedding is a problem for us in this country. It has to be stopped. And there's no reason why it should continue at the pace it is. And therefore, load shedding is not only a direct result of state capture activities at Eskom. It is also a direct result of failed neoliberal economic paradigm adopted by our government. Under the white paper on energy, the government chose not to invest in new public power generation capacity. And this decision was against the imperative to build electricity supply for self-sufficiency to provide our people with energy, to keep pace, particularly with the most impressive post-1994 electrification rollout by our government. That's commendable, but we did not keep pace with the ability to develop capacity to meet that obligation. The government prioritized, therefore, leaving new power generation capacity to building for private power producers, the so-called independent power producers, and to unbundle Eskom to facilitate the procurement of power from the profit-driven interest. This stance was part of the macroeconomic framework, especially the fiscal policy framework or finance policy framework. The government prioritized austerity, cutting budgets, social budget or social spending in a way that affects the economic and social transformation and development imperatives, in the main to please capital. What I think Comrade Mzwadile was capturing with Joe Slovo's warnings. Even black capitalists who benefited, who wanted to benefit out of this, but at the expense of our masses. But by the time Medupi and Kusile power stations and their build programs came to the fore, everybody knows it was too little too late. The old power stations were obviously aging and starting to break down frequently. Meanwhile, the construction of the two badly designed power stations missed completion deadlines, resulting in unsustainable cost overruns, as well as contributing in no small ways to measures that we now see as the debt afflicting Eskom. So this cost overruns because of these poor designs. As you know, at some point they had to go back to get some machines that they put in that power station which could not function. And those machines were bespoke machines. In other words, they were not locally produced or developed. They were specially designed. And with the poor design of those stations, the cost overruns became unbearable. We are simply saying, comrades, government must resolve the electricity crisis and stop load shedding as a matter of urgency. We want also to indicate, comrades, that the transmission grid is important for electricity security. Equally, the source of the current load shedding lies in electric power generation, beyond just the transmission grid. Therefore, the generation capacity for electricity is very important for supply security of our electricity, and we need public investment, public intervention in this regard. For instance, we are given by Eskom that and government that the reason being behind the current load shedding is largely sabotage by contractors in outsourced operations. Now, to secure electricity supply when the saboteurs are contracted by Eskom requires us to take over that particular supply process and not allow subcontracting in Eskom work. In other words, we must empower Eskom to fulfill its own mandate, not rely on this subcontracting. Because the subcontractors are masters of sabotage. They do the work, sabotage it 2 weeks later so that they can come and repair the work, and at a cost. So they make money at the expense of South Africa and South African's economy. So government must take over the leadership of the entirety of Eskom production of energy. We must also make sure that We bring in preventive measures for maintenance of Eskom to avoid, that is Eskom plants, to avoid continuous breakdown of many of these plants. We hope in this process this can contribute towards reducing load shedding. Equally, the most important thing is that we need to invest in power generation and forego this neoliberal path that prioritizes investment in new power generation capacity by profit-driven private power producers. President Lula of Brazil, who took office on the 1st of January, one of his first messages was basically to say they are stopping the sale of state-owned enterprises. He called for investment to Brazil, but said, don't buy our state-owned enterprises because they are not for sale. Because which investor brings value to a country when they are buying what you already have? The only thing that they can bring is technological advancement that we can share, we can buy. But there should be no basis why we should put our SOEs for sale. Again, the predominantly capitalist economy in our country is going to struggle, is continuing to struggle. And its policy logjam, it's failing the ability for this economy to respond to the needs of our people. In other words, the current policies that we have are unable to overcome the persisting high levels of unemployment, poverty, and inequality in our country. Over 12 million active South Africans who are supposed to be employed are not working. They are so-called discouraged work seekers. Nearly half of these are women. Majority subsist on an income below the upper bound poverty levels. Wages and grants have not been increasing at a rate commensurate with the rising cost of living in our country. And the majority of our people continue to live in poverty and are even under greater, more strain because of fuel costs and increase in food prices. And this have risen at an unprecedented level with no government intervention to stop their high rise, or what you call inflation, but basically to declare no more increases on basic food. A political leadership in government must be able to make these demands, make these instructions, because of the authority that we have to lead our society. We cannot allow the situation whereby the poor cannot afford living itself. So measures must be taken by our government in this regard. At the same time, we appreciate that all of these problems, particularly related to the high cost of living today, the rise of food prices, the soaring inflation, is precisely because of this imperialist aggression, wars, and sanctions that they've imposed, particularly on oil-producing countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Russia, led by the US and NATO in this imposition. And therefore, it is these countries that must take responsibility for condemning the world to poverty. But beside their active role and participation in the war that they provoke through NATO in Ukraine, the US-led imperialist forces have weaponized these sanctions. The point that Comrade Ian was raising regarding even this meeting at the US-Africa Summit, where they were beginning, the Congress in the US is beginning to impose sanctions on anyone that trades with Russia. Completely unacceptable. Our countries must remain independent. Trade with whoever they so wish, not at the behest of the United States or European countries. And we've seen that these sanctions that have now been made active weapons of engagement in the war in Ukraine, beside the military hardware that they are dumping and the technical support that they are dumping on Ukraine, because they want to bring in new, better machines of war. That's why all of these European countries, they are giving away all their old stock to Ukraine to use in this current war, but they are bringing in new stock. The world is living dangerously because of poor leadership, largely from Europe and the United States of America. At the same time, comrades, we appreciate that oil is an important input in production cost in our country. South Africa must buy oil directly from Russia. South Africa must buy oil directly from Venezuela. South Africa must buy oil directly from Iran, irrespective of what the USA thinks. We need that now for our people to live better. Because now the rising cost of living is unbearable for the poor. And we can't just be mollycoddling Europe. Every other thing must go because Europe wants it this way or America wants it this way. At the same time, we continue to face highly racialized class inequality in our country that Comrade Joe Slovo had fought against throughout his life. We have seen that now that with these sanctions that are imposed on various parts of the world, Comrade Mike spoke about this question, as the most unequal country in the world, measured against 164 countries, our levels of poverty continues. At the same time, the wealthiest 10% of the population in South Africa owns 80% of our wealth. In other words, whilst the working class and the poor continues to go deeper into poverty, this small 10% in our society is owning more wealth, it's becoming more and more richer. This is the class reality of our country. These are the questions that must be tackled on even by our movement. At the same time, majority of our people remain propertyless. They live in poverty, in squalor conditions, without adequate social security protection. We are fighting as the SABC and other progressive forces for basic protection of the masses. And this has become a continuous battle just to make sure that social distress grants is continued post March, and most certainly, you know, a fellow fighter will go to war if this thing is not continued. But there's been assurances from the ANC conference that this should be continued. But that's not enough. We need much more interventions than that so that our people can come out of poverty. We need a strategic framework by government to tackle poverty in this country. At the moment, the program to deal with poverty is obfuscated in many policies in government. It's not visible. There's no direct program that you say, with this program we can end poverty in 3 years, in 4 years. So it's just some intervention measures. We need now to fight towards having poverty identified as a major problem in our country. We tackle it as such. All government programs must tackle this crisis